Hey, welcome to our Best Practices webinar series. I'm Maria Keffler from Advocates Protecting Children, and today we have detransitioner Petra Harangir with us to talk about her experience as a trans teen. So Petra, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Petra Harangir. Obviously, that's a pseudonym. I'm 20 years old right now. Obviously, I'm a woman. I'm in college right now, majoring in math. I was trans identified for 2.5 years, from seventh grade to right before 10th grade. Uh, yeah. When I was in elementary school, I was very much your typical, girly girl, wore skirts, dresses, so on and so forth. Uh, I went to middle school and things started to really change. I had one good friend in middle school. I am autistic. 60% of trans identified people, kids and adults, are autistic. That's a huge part of the demographic. Was included in that. I had one good friend. I was really socially awkward, not great at making other friends. And I started going through puberty and becoming really uncomfortable in my body. As an autistic person, I have a lot of sensory issues, and that combined with puberty was very distressing. It is for a lot of autistic people and just neurotypical kids. It's not a great time, as I'm certain all of you know. And I started becoming more stereotypically masculine. I started wearing t shirts, like sweatshirts, that kind of thing. I saw a lot of other girls my age really embracing their sexuality, wearing very tight, revealing clothing. They were starting to date. This was in sixth grade. I was not interested in that. I thought it was disgusting. So I really developed a I'm not like other girls kind of internal complex. I got invited to the GSA club, the Gender Sexuality Alliance Club, or Gay Straight Alliance Club, depending on who you ask, by one of my friends who called herself bisexual. It was Fridays at lunch at noon for an hour, sixth graders like myself through 12th graders, so all of middle and high school, in a room alone with no adults talking about sexual topics. We learned about things that I don't want to dwell back upon because it is genuinely very disgusting. And I decided that I was transgender because everyone there was either trans or, every type of gay imaginable. And it was very, very cool. I was expressing, I'm feeling really uncomfortable in my body. I don't like the way other girls are talking, the way they're acting, the way they're starting to get interested in guys. I don't like that. I think this might be evidence that I'm, you know, some form of transgender, and every single person, including, the seniors in high school who at the time were so cool to me. Oh, yes, that means you're transgender. That's really, really evident that, you're not a quote unquote cis straight woman, because nobody wants to be a cis straight woman. That's looked down upon. That's not cool. Uh, and what sixth grader is going to tell the cool seniors, the Raven wearing the black jacket with all the pins and the dyed hair, who's so cool? No, I don't actually think I'm transgender. So I really started to agree with them. I remember one time, Mrs. Keffler has her book, Decis, Detrans, Detox. I've read it. She talked about how it's a cult and how cults do certain things. I think there's 7 different things. I could be wrong. They did every single one of those things with me. The love bombing, I remember very clearly. I told my quote unquote friends at the GSA club, yeah, my parents don't support me. They don't think I'm trans. And every single person, there's probably 15 or 20 people in that room, every single one of them got out of their seats, came over, started hugging me, petting me. Oh, your parents don't love you. We love you, though. You're safe with us. Completely love bombing, but it's effective. It happened with me. It happened with so many of my friends, so many other people in that school. Probably about a third of that school was either like trans or very, very openly an ally. Uh, yeah, so suddenly I had an entire friend group. I had a community. I had people who said they cared about me, and I wasn't the strange, uncool autistic person anymore. My parents, however, They were not super happy about this. They understandably said, our 12-year-old daughter is spending an hour every week alone in a room with 12th graders talking about sex. We don't want this. Beyond that, there was also the issue of bathrooms. I was using the men's bathroom because I didn't want to use the women's bathroom. And they weren't comfortable with that because it was a dual middle and high school. And the school administrators basically said, that's our policy. Kids can use whatever restroom they want, and we're just going to accept the risk of sexual assault, of those kinds of things that are very real. And so my parents decided to pull me to homeschool, and I was not happy about it, as I'm certain you can imagine. Suddenly, I was pulled away from that quote unquote community. I didn't have a phone up until that point. I didn't get a phone until actually quite recently. Uh, but I didn't have a phone. They took away my social media. They actually took away my internet entirely for a short period of time. And they put me into a homeschool co op called Classical Conversations. And all of a sudden, the voices that I was getting, you're trans, you're trans, you're trans, you're trans, they weren't there anymore. And so I had to start thinking critically about, okay, I'm in a group of people now who don't agree with me. They don't think I'm trans. They're not going to blindly agree with everything I say. I believe that I am trans, so I have to prove it to them from a logical standpoint. And I researched, uh, I actually, advocates resources was, well, not advocates, but some of the resources that they have, some of the studies that they've shown, I looked through those and I was like, I'm going to prove once and for all trans is real. I am trans and I am a boy, because I had a number of traumatic events happen where I believed that women were weak. And so I had to prove that I was a boy. And more, as I was researching, as I was trying to create a logical argument to say, this is real, I was realizing it isn't. There was a study about how transgender identified people will, commit suicide if they're not given, gender affirming care. I don't remember exactly what it was, but people use that study all the time. If you look at it, it's 27 transgender identified people, no control group, and they were each asked, have you ever considered suicide? And the majority of them said yes, which is unfortunate, but that is not a study. That's a questionnaire of a tiny group with no control group. And just things like that, just realizing, wow, all of this research that I have been told over and over again is so solid. The science is settled, the science is settled. That's all fake. It's all completely procured in order to create the image of the science is settled on this topic when it isn't. Combined with the fact that suddenly I was not surrounded by those voices just affirming every single thing that I said, I realized I really cannot logically support this. If I'm going to be trans, I'm going to be living in cognitive dissonance. And as an autistic person, that is very difficult. Everything needs to make sense, and that's part of why autistic people are so easily targeted by transgenderism. Is we like having solutions to problems that make sense, and we need to have everything in our worlds make sense. I was going through extremely distressing puberty. I was being told by people bigger and stronger than me, you're just a weak little girl. That was a problem. It made sense that, oh, I'm not a weak little girl, so that means that I'm a boy. And realizing that transgenderism just has no logical foundation, it has absolutely nothing behind it, that was crushing. And after a lot of wrestling with that, it was while I was actually walking my neighbor's dog, I was like, you know what? If I'm not trans, I'm not trans. I don't want to be a woman. I hate being a woman. But if that is the only thing that makes sense, then I suppose that has to be real. And after that, I realized I'm okay with being a woman. And there is more to being a woman than just being a sexual object, than wearing stereotypically feminine, revealing, tight clothing. I'm very much a tomboy. I don't wear dresses. I don't like makeup, anything like that. I have short hair, but that's okay because that doesn't make me not a woman. And it's actually been even more empowering than trying to say that I'm trans, to be able to say, I look trans, but I'm not. I'm a woman. I'm perfectly happy being that way. And I've had some really interesting conversations pop up because people assumed that I was transgender. And I said, no, my name is, I'll say Petra, a female name, and I'm proud to be a woman. And especially in college, where there are so many transgender identified people who do believe that it is the solution to their dysphoria, it's been really eye opening for some of them, I think, I hope. Uh, and so I'm very glad that I desisted. And while every now and then I still do think, man, it'd be so nice to be a guy, I'm glad that I'm not. And I'm glad that my parents took all of the steps that it took to pull me away from that. One of the biggest problems that I've kind of seen is how much autistic people, such as myself, are targeted. As I said before, transgenderism very, very much targets us. We have sensory issues, often extreme discomfort, especially during puberty when things are starting to change. We don't often feel comfortable in our bodies. I certainly didn't. And so, of course, if you're already feeling discomfortable in your body, somebody comes along and says, that's a problem caused by this, and there is a one size fits all solution that will make you feel better, everything will be okay. That's really, really tempting to autistic people because we like those answers. We like that, okay, this is the problem, this is the solution. And it often leads to people devoting themselves on that path and saying, I'm transgender, I'm going to get surgeries, I'm going to get hormones, and they're not reversible. I'm grateful that I never got any of that. Uh, but what happens is doctors tell you, oh, we'll give you the hormones, but if you ever change your mind, which you won't, but if you ever change your mind, then we can just reverse it all and your body will be perfectly okay. When in fact, even just taking hormones for a couple of months can completely screw up your body. The surgeries, those aren't reversible either. You can't just get a double mastectomy, aka top surgery, and then get an augmentation and have the exact same natural bust that you had before. And there are so many detransitioners who went through those procedures and are just mutilated afterwards. And it's because nobody told them no. Nobody told them this isn't real. Nobody questioned them like I was questioned. Yeah, as I said before, 60% of trans identified people are diagnosed autistic, and that's only the diagnosed autistic. If you've ever met neurodivergent people, there are a lot of ones who are not diagnosed, so I think it's higher. We lack community often because we're very awkward, so you get an instant community, you get support. We think in black and white, so again, problem, solution. And oftentimes, detransitioners are either told if you detransition, that's because you weren't trans in the first place, which doesn't really make a lot of sense because if anyone who says they're trans is trans, then you can't retroactively change that. But you're also told, and I was told this by some of my friends, uh, you're just suppressing your true self, when in fact, I found my true self in being a woman. I still see so much, I call it kind of yay gay, where people are just so obsessed with trans, with gay, with any kind of LGBTQ messaging, stories, anything like that. People just slurp it up. They love it more than anything. And it's ironic because they can't imagine that it would be a social contagion. They make it so incredibly cool. They lure young girls like my past self into it and then insist it's not a social contagion, it's not cool. These people are trans because they really are trans, when in fact, a lot of them are just hurt and in need of a better and more long term solution than blaming all of your hurts on some spiritual dissonance that can be solved through surgery. So, yeah, my biggest message for anyone who has, I imagine that's probably the largest demographic watching this webinar is people who have loved ones in their life who are struggling with this. Uh, just ask genuine questions, not, oh, you're not trans. I want to ask genuine questions that make them think. And then if you are their parent, no cell phone, no social media and no bad influences. Those were the 3 biggest things that pulled me out of this, because as soon as you're not in that echo chamber anymore and you have to face this thing head on, you realize how weak it is. So, yeah, thank you for listening to my overview of my story, and I'm happy to answer any questions. There is one right here. Can you
Yep.
name the most important actions and or decisions your parents made to assist you on your path to desisting? Yeah, definitely the pulling to homeschool. Again, I never had a cell phone until actually just a couple months ago. I didn't want one, but taking away the cell phone if it's there, and just again not having access to the echo chamber, and then no social media as well, because social media is such a cesspool for all of this. People just shove it down your throat, and it's amazing, it's wonderful, everything needs to be trans. And so having that message constantly echoing around you is definitely not going to help with trying to get out of it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, did anybody other than your parents disagree with you about the trans identification? It sounds like so many of the voices in your life were telling you, yes, you're trans, you absolutely are. But was there anybody else besides your parents kind of pushing back?
Uh, for the most part, my parents were the major ones. My two siblings were pretty hands off about it. Uh, it was mainly my parents. There were a lot of people in my life, neighbors, kind of like more, distant family members and so forth, who didn't want to openly agree with me in order not to disrespect my parents, who obviously they were neighbors with as well. But, anytime I was out going for a walk, like, "Hey, how are you feeling?" Checking up on me, not because they were genuinely concerned as much as they thought, "Oh, this is a poor, oppressed trans kid with unaffirming parents."
Yeah.
Uh, especially especially the kids from the homeschool co-op. They were one of the biggest things because they were my peers, and I disagreed with just about everything that they ever said, and many of the things that they said I still disagree with, but they forced me to start thinking critically about things and saying, "Okay, I have to start defending my opinions because they're not just gonna blindly agree with me about them."
Did you have the homeschool co-op, um, was it a large group? Was it different ages? Like what did that look like when you went to homeschool? Was it and like the kids who were pushing back on you, how exactly did they do that?
Uh, I don't remember exactly how many kids there were. It was definitely less than 10. It was maybe like 6 or 7 if I had to guess. They were all my age, mixed male and female, and I would have been in ninth grade at the time. Yeah, I would have been in ninth grade. And so we were all ninth graders, and I actually didn't like this class structure, but I think it was helpful for this specifically. You walk in, once a week, it's your co op, and then you're sitting in that room for 6 hours or so, just talking about, your math classes, your science classes, whatever. Uh, you know, it's your once a week learning when you like, and then you go home and you do all the homework. And so we spent the entire day all in that room together discussing things, and oftentimes it would turn to like Socratic style discussions. It was very, very literature focused, very critical thinking focused, very logic focused, which I have always been more of a math person. And so that really, really encouraged me to start thinking critically, because that was something I'd never really been exposed to before. Let me see. Do you have any questions you would recommend for my son who desisted but is now dating a trans boy? We condemn this relationship. That's really tough because, especially being the parent, there's always the, oh, you're just my parent. You just don't like my relationship with this person. That's really tough. Again, just the asking questions, I guess, and also just fostering a really good relationship with your son. I have one of my best friends in the universe. He's one of the most amazing guys, but he's full into this. He's not trans identified himself, but he has had a couple relationships with trans identified people, rebounds, so forth. Really struggles with that. And there was one relationship in particular where he had just gotten out of another relationship with a trans identified person, rebounded really hard, and was in this relationship with this other person and could not imagine that it wasn't going to work out. He threw his heart into it because he was hurting. And I was really struggling. I was like, how am I going to be his friend through this? And I basically decided I need to really foster my relationship with him well, be his friend, be there for him, ask questions, but not openly, like tell him he's being stupid or anything because he's not going to listen to that. And then when the relationship did start to crumble, I was like, I'm here for you. I'm not going to leave you, even though I kind of saw it coming. And yeah, even just being there and just like being a support and showing that you care, even if you disagree, just so that if the relationship does fall apart or if something bad does happen, which I hope it happens in the most gentle way possible. But if something bad does happen, then you can say, I'm here for you. I care about you. And then the person that you do care about will realize, like, this person is really here for me.
Petra, can you suggest what are some good questions to ask to start getting somebody to recognize the cognitive dissonance in this? The person who just asked the question, I think, is looking for like what questions could
Mm.
the parent ask the child that might uncover this isn't logical, or the cognitive dissonance. Okay, you desisted. So clearly you recognize it wasn't for you. How are you justifying that it might be okay for this boy? Anyway, can you just, any questions that you could ask a person who's kind of sucked into this, that the question would start revealing some of the, I guess, cognitive dissonance?
I guess the first thing you'd want to ask yourself is, what specifically are you hoping to reveal? Like, now, is your son in a relationship with somebody who's transgender, really cares about this person but disagrees with them? Or does your son, agree with it and just doesn't think it was for him? Because in the first case, trying to show, this really has no logical backing isn't going to do anything. Whereas in the second case, it might. So you really want to ask, okay, why is my son in this relationship? Is this relationship problematic? If so, how? Uh, Obviously, how can I support him without being affirming? And then also, just like, for example, if it is the second scenario where you really want to have him understand this doesn't make sense, this is problematic, then even just finding, and there's a lot of them, just finding some of the ways in which gender ideology doesn't make sense. For example, gender is fluid. I can be a boy today and then a girl tomorrow and then a girl boy 3.0 the next day, but it's also fixed. If you're transgender, you can't become cisgender again. So just being genuinely inquisitive and being like, hey, I'm just really curious. I'm not really sure I understand this, respectfully, like, is gender fluid or is it solid? I really don't understand. Maybe if this person is trying to like force this upon your son, oh, you used to be trans, well, maybe you still are, then asking questions like, I wonder why this person would ask that, since kind of assuming gender is fixed, like, why would this person want to encourage you to pursue a transgender identity? And just really picking apart for yourself, what are the problems here, and how can I, in the most respectful and unassuming way, sort of nudge the person that I care about to start to notice those problems.
This is a separate thing, but since we're talking about, that you can't go back to being cisgender, one of the things we hear from detransitioners a lot is that they are rejected by the LGBTQ community. And just this morning, I saw a post on Reddit from a detransitioner who is in Germany, but said, I believe it's a she registered for a LGB event. And as part of the registration, she mentioned that she was a detransitioner and she was kicked out of the registration. She was rejected. She was told that she can't participate. And she was just really devastated. She still considers herself part of the LGBT and TQ community, even though she's no longer trans. Um, do you, I mean, that seems to be a widespread phenomenon, and you hinted during your talk about some friends saying that, oh, you aren't really a detransitioner. I mean, have you had that experience a bit?
Very much so, yeah. When I was identified as transgender, so I identified as transgender for 2.5 years. Seventh and eighth grade, I was in a middle school. It was about halfway through seventh grade, I think, when I first decided to identify. And then it was throughout ninth grade that I also identified, but that was when I was homeschooled. So in late seventh and eighth grade, I was part of this community of, trans and gay and so forth people. And they loved on me. They said I was part of their community, getting invited places. And then when I was pulled to homeschool, I was no longer at that school, but I was still identified as transgender. So I still thought that they were my friends and that they were right and so forth. And all but the one best friend that I still had from like sixth grade, all of them just completely ghosted me. Uh, there were a couple times where I tried to reach out, like through that friend, trying to, like get together with them, and just like I didn't exist to them anymore. And it was because I've been pulled to homeschool. My parents are brainwashing me. I'm not relevant anymore. And that was really crushing. Uh, but even more so when I did finally realize, and that was one of the biggest things that made me realize, wow, they really didn't actually care about me. But when I did finally desist and I talked to that one friend and I said, yeah, I really don't think I'm transgender. I'm going to accept myself as a woman. She asked me something that still makes me laugh. She went, do you think your parents have been a bad influence on you? But that just made me laugh so much. But
That's
yeah,
funny,
they
but it's funny, but it's also kind of horrifying that people can think that parents who are helping you accept your biological sex as valid are somehow a bad influence or abusive. That's pretty horrifying.
yeah, knowing that friend, she's still one of my friends. We still hang out and everything. It definitely caused a rift in our friendship. She actually cut me off for a year, because she just, it was a number of things. I started questioning LGBTQ ideology, especially just in a way that wasn't particularly respectful to the fact that she really still cared about it. I think I could have done it a lot better, but she cut me off. And then, like a year later on her birthday, I texted her happy birthday and we reconnected. But yeah, my entire friend group just completely cut me off. Let me see.
Mm.
When they loved bomb you, did you find it odd or uncomfortable? Was it obvious their intent was to drive a wedge between you and your parents? It was definitely uncomfortable. I've never been a big hugger. That's part of being autistic. I don't like being touched. I don't like being that kind of thing. And so when they all did come over and hug me, I really did think that they were just really, being caring. And I didn't like the way that they were doing it. I thought it was weird, but I was like, they just really care. It was only afterwards that I look back on that and on a number of other things that happened in that club where I was like, wow, that was really messed up. They should not have done that.
About how many people were in your GSA club at school?
It's been a while, so I don't really remember. There were a couple, regular attenders, a couple of the seniors, obviously. Uh, Probably an average of like 15 to 20 people. There were a number of people who came some weeks, not other weeks, but there was definitely like a regular group.
And you said that you all met together with no adult in the room. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, there was one teacher in that school. Our school was really, really laid back, so you didn't have to eat lunch in the cafeteria. You could eat lunch, in the classrooms, in the hallways, whatever, spend time with your friends. And so there was one teacher who was homosexual, and very much, an ally and so forth. And so his classroom would be the spot for the GSA club. He usually wasn't there. He like had, teacher related work to do on lunches. So it would just be all of us in his classroom, and they would do presentations on, the AIDS epidemic. And they even talked about, what is bestiality? Um, there
You
was
were what?
one
You were like 12, 13, and they're talking about bestiality in the GSA club.
exactly, yeah. And then there's one point where one of them got up and started talking about the miracle of them having found a gene that causes homosexuality and proof that it's innate. And even back then, I was like, I was learning about genetics at that point, I think. And so I was like, yeah, I really hesitate to think that there's one particular gene that causes all of homosexuality. And so that was actually one of the things that started making me really criticize it a little bit.
Mm, that's amazing. Um, I did anyone else have any questions that they wanted to pose to Petra? This has been really eye-opening. I'm sorry for what you went through, but I'm so glad to know that you're in a healthy place and that you're, what, 5, 6 years past this now. Um, any last thoughts? I think a lot, as you mentioned, a lot of the people who are watching this are parents who are struggling with this. Do you have any last advice for people who are trying to get their kids through this?
Yeah, it's really tempting. And this is me also thinking from a perspective of having friends who are going through this, including that one friend. It's really tempting to be like, "Oh my gosh, this is so stupid. Why are you like this?" And you're like, "You're not a boy, you're a girl," or like vice versa. But that doesn't help anything. And really just because the LGBT community, they're faux support, they're faux friends, they create these glamour families or whatever they're called, and it's we love you, we support you. Your real family really doesn't. So even if it's just being that support, like, being there for the people that you care about, like that one friend, I have bent over backwards to help him with things that most friends probably wouldn't have helped with, and just being that support. And then when the fake support, the LGBTQ, we love you, when they inevitably fail to deliver, that person will realize between the two of these, there's only one person here that really truly cared about me and was willing to sacrifice for me. And that's the person who says that I'm not trans. And that is a huge, huge part of realizing the fakeness of the ideology. Not directly realizing it, but realizing that the people who tell you that you're trans aren't the ones who actually care about you.
I've heard that. We've heard that from other detransitioners too, that as as badly as they maybe treated their parents while they were trans identified, and the parents were saying, I'm not going to call you this other name. I'm not going to call you by wrong pronouns. I love you, but I'm not going to do that. That those parents are the soft landing place because when the child wakes up and realizes, as you said, all these other people have lied to me. Oh my gosh, mom and dad never lied to me. They actually cared about me. Grandma and grandpa never lied to me. It's easier, I think, to come back and say, whoa, I was really wrong. I made a huge mistake. To people who have consistently shown care and love for you by being honest, rather than if they cheer led you, yeah, it's so great that you're trans. That's great. That's going to make it harder, right? Make it harder for you to go, you know what? I really was wrong about this.
Yeah, especially just like my parents never, okay, my dad was a little bit, he occasionally got a little annoyed with me, but my mom especially, she was never, oh, this is stupid, this is ridiculous. And when I started to realize I don't think I'm trans, it started with actually making jokes. I made a joke about reaching up to the refrigerator and be like, "Oh, I can reach that for you." And I'm the same height as my mom, and so she was like, "You're the same height as me," and I was like, "Oh, I identify as a tall person." But when the time came to really like tell her, I don't think I'm trans anymore, she was a soft landing place because she hadn't affirmed me, but she also hadn't made fun of me. And so it was like, she's not going to affirm me and tell me, no, 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 you are trans, or make fun of me and tell me, oh, I was right all along.
Mm.
Let me
A
see.
couple more questions, yeah, in the chat.
Yeah, was there any particular question that struck you as revelatory for the collapse of trans ideology and specific concepts that brought you around? That's a good question. It was a lot of it was really personal. Um, Dealing with my body specifically. I have always been really uncomfortable in my body. I've always had a lot of sensory issues. I think the thing that was really revelatory was starting martial arts. It wasn't a question as much of it as it was an answer. Once I started like really using my body, I was doing push-ups, curl-ups every single day. Got my black belt. I doing these complicated kicks, these complicated patterns, and getting to the point where I no longer felt like an alien piloting a meat suit. That was the point where it's like, I think I actually love my body. And I think that I am content with existing in this the way it is because I can mold it into what I want to without having to use surgeries. So there wasn't ever really a specific question. I think trans ideology has so many holes that picking any one hole to tear it down with is almost like you almost can't do it because there's so many of them. But I think the really specific thing that eventually brought me around was getting my black belt and getting to the point where I did love my body. And then, do you feel the need to hide your period of trans identification from people you meet in college? Are there groups where it is easier to reveal this or to reveal your views about transgenderism? Uh, that's a pretty good question. I've tried to be fairly open about it. I don't go around telling people just because it's pretty irrelevant most of the time. But I'm pretty like I'm fairly what's the word? I'm fairly open about it. That one friend of mine, I actually brought it up because he was struggling with, these rebound relationships with trans people and so forth. And I told him my story and kind of said, yeah, so, I really sincerely apologize if I come across as, quote unquote transphobic, but I was really hurt by that group of people. They really, really hurt me. And like I really don't think that a lot of the hoo-ha around it is correct. I don't think like everyone who says that they're trans is trans. And he didn't make fun of me. He really seemed to consider it. And then other groups where this is easier to reveal. I'll be entirely honest, it's actually easier to talk about it with people who are in it currently because it feels a little bit more relevant. And I think no matter how much cognitive dissonance you're embroiled in, like even the people who are so incredibly like deep in this, I think there's always that level of I'm really not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. There is that level of cognitive dissonance no matter how much you're into it. And so having that get poked by, hey, I used to be trans identified, but I'm not anymore, I think a lot of people take it easier than you would expect them to. Like I went to an event at college. I was just, a, like flower something painting with one of my friends, and I met a trans girl there. And I didn't even tell her that I was a detransitioner. I think she very much assumed that I was transgender because, obviously female, but short hair, masculine clothing, so forth. And I introduced myself by my first name, well, Petra. And she seemed to find that really interesting. We didn't even talk about it. I don't think she even knows to this day that I'm a detransitioner, but just having, oh, this very gender nonconforming person who's perfectly comfortable with being female. And I told her that, like, yeah, I'm a woman. Even just that, I think, is really interesting to a lot of people. So it's actually fairly easy to talk about a lot of the time.
Is there a reason why you're staying incognito in public?
Uh, It's mainly just while on an individual basis, when you're talking with somebody who's in this, they're usually very respectful. They're really nice people. Like even the people who are, deeply kind of brainwashed by this, they're nice people. They're really sweet and they just really genuinely believe this. But there are always the people who are absolutely rabid about it, especially online where they don't need to deal with the consequences of their actions. And while I, at the end of the day, really don't care that much about what people think of me, as I'm in college, I'm, trying to get good grades. I'm trying to, graduate and then get myself situated in the job market and everything. I really don't want the burden of, oh my gosh, you have this, controversial activism background. I'd rather not deal with that. So I actually would like to come out like as myself with my face and everything. I think that would be beneficial in some ways, but there's just so much of a chance of that kind of ruining my potential career.
Yeah, I think that's wise. I just kind of wanted to hear what you had to say about it. Well, thank you so much, Petra. This has been really helpful. The questions in the chat were great questions. Thank you so much, everyone who joined us today. Again, we're going to get to speak with another detransitioner, Chris, in just a couple of weeks. So we hope that you'll be able to join for that. You know what? We got one more question. Petra, are you okay with taking on one more question before we close?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. I saw, yeah, did you get into binding while you were trans? Uh, so I did have a binder. It's because of my parents who had researched it and everything, they told me all of the horror stories of, this can crush your chest and so forth. And that was around the time that I was starting to get in physical fitness. I didn't wear it regularly. I actually remember I had a whiteboard next to my bed, and it was like 20 push-ups, 20 curl-ups, do all my homework, and I had a checklist. And if I got that checklist done, I would reward myself by wearing the binder the next day, which ironically actually helped me with organization quite a lot. But I didn't wear it every day, obviously, because I'm not very organized. And after a while, when my parents found out that I had it, they basically told me, "You are not wearing that." And so they said, "Until you give us the binder, we are taking away your internet." And I actually went without internet, without devices for a very long time because I was so determined to hold on to that binder, which in turn actually was very beneficial to me because I did not end up on devices all the time. I started going for walks. I started being more physically active. But I think especially just knowing that it can cause all of those gruesome side effects, uh, that really turned me off from it. And also just like I've always had a pretty small chest. I'm very, very flat. And so I think not really needing it as much also really helped. But again, as I started getting more comfortable with my level of physical fitness, it really became not necessary to me anymore. And it was more of an issue of pride of turning it over to my parents than it was of actually wanting the binder.
One of the things that I've heard is that autistic people really like the feeling of compression. I think about um, Temple Grandin. If you don't know about Temple Grandin and you have any autistic people in your life, I highly recommend you look into Temple Grandin. But she made this squeeze box for herself that she would get in, and it was made of wood, I think, and it would actually squeeze her and it'll calm her down. And I have heard that perhaps one of the reasons girls like the binder is for the compression it provides. And if you're on the autism spectrum or you're neurodivergent, the compression may feel good. And so one of the things that we've recommended is if you have a daughter who's really likes the binder, see if you can get her to switch to a compression shirt. It's like an athletic shirt. It's the compression is there, but it's not going to crush. It's not going to crush the flesh. It's not going to break the ribs, but it might provide just enough of that squeeze that will make the girl feel a little better. Somebody asked if we can't make the next webinar, can we get a recorded version? Yes, all of our webinars, we record them and we put them on YouTube and we do link them at our website so you can see them all. Our website is advocatesprotectingchildren.org, and these are the best practices webinar. There's an icon right on our homepage where it'll link to the YouTube playlist and you can see all of them. So thank you so much, Petra. This was a great conversation. Thank you to everyone who came and the great questions you asked. We will get this up on YouTube, hopefully in the next 24 hours. And we look forward to seeing you hopefully on October 25th. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.